In Fallout 3, you can sell a human being for 250 caps. Children are 1,000 caps, because obviously they're worth more. There's a weapon called the Mesmetron that exists purely to enslave people, and the explosive collars are designed to cut into your neck when you swallow, so you never forget your property. Fallout 4 lets you create slaves from your own son's DNA. New Vegas has a faction that has enslaved 87 tribes across 4 states and keeps meticulous ledgers tracking every transaction. If you think this is all just fake video game stuff, you would be wrong. These slave economies work the exact same way real ones have throughout history. Turns out Bethesda and Obsidian did their homework, and the economics aren't even the disturbing part. We're going chronologically through 3 Fallout games, as each approach slavery very differently, starting with Paradise Falls, which is a pre-war shopping mall in Fallout 3 that has been converted into a slave auction house. It's run by a guy named Eulogy Jones, who dresses like a pimp and literally sleeps with 2 slave women at all times to project power. This man rose to power by using slaves as prostitutes to gather intel on his competitors, then murdered the previous leader. He's not subtle about what this place is. And the economics are disturbingly straightforward. Random wastelanders are worth 250 caps each. Specific VIP targets, people the slavers want for particular reasons, are also 250 caps. Talk about a scam! Children range from 500 to 1,000 caps depending on who they are. You can also buy a slave companion named Clover for 1,000 caps, and she comes with Stockholm Syndrome so severe, she'll follow you anywhere. The Mesmetron costs 200 caps for 10 rounds of ammunition. The collars are free, and they give you a new one every time you deliver a slave. It's a business expense.
This is business!
But let's talk about those collars, because they represent pre-war engineering dedicated specifically to human control. Each one weighs about 5 pounds of solid steel. Inside, there's a microphone, a speaker, a radio transmitter, and a small explosive charge. The weight and fit are calibrated so the collar cuts into your neck whenever you swallow or turn your head. When triggered, the explosive charge detonates and obliterates everything above the neck. Clean, efficient, and reusable. You just pry it off the body and put it on the next person. And the worst part, or best part about it, depending on your personal worldview, is that Paradise Falls isn't some isolated camp of psychopaths. They trade with raider gangs, wealthy settlers like Alistair Tenpenny, and the Pitt's industrial operations. This is a functioning business integrated into the Capital Wasteland's economy. There's supply, demand, distribution networks, and repeat customers. The game lets you participate in all of it. The Mesmetron works on almost any non-essential NPC in the game. Hooray! See that friendly NPC merchant who's been selling you supplies? 250 caps. That doctor who patched you up? 250 caps. Each enslavement costs you negative 100 karma. The game tells you it's evil, but it doesn't stop you. What makes this deeply uncomfortable is how normal it all feels once you're inside Paradise Falls. Slavers joke with each other. They complain about work. Eulogy holds courts like any other faction leader. There's a clinic, a bar, and sleeping quarters. It's just another settlement in the wasteland, except the product being traded is people. And that's exactly how real slave markets function throughout history. They weren't hidden in the shadows, they were public, legal, and integrated into the economy. The Richmond slave market in Virginia was right downtown, and the largest slave market in the American South was in New Orleans, operating openly with newspaper advertisements. In ancient Rome, slaves were sold at the Forum, the center of civic life. Paradise Falls works because it's operating on the same economic logic and lets you choose to be evil if you want. The Pitt DLC, though, it doesn't let you off that easy. Pittsburgh survived the nuclear war without taking a direct hit, but the rivers carried enough radiation to turn it into a hellscape anyway. By Fallout 3's timeline, it houses the only operational steel mill the Brotherhood of Steel ever encountered, and that mill runs entirely on slave labor. Lord Assure runs the place. He's a former Brotherhood of Steel initiate who survived when they raided Pittsburgh and massacred everyone they found, an event called the Scourge. He came back years later, took over, and rebuilt the steel industry using slaves. Except he refuses to call them slaves. They're workers. The raiders who enforce his rule? Those are soldiers. The linguistic gymnastics here are doing a lot of work here. His justification has a twisted logic to it. Everyone in the pit has troglodyte degeneration contagion, a disease that prevents reproduction reproduction, and eventually mutates you into a feral trog. Without a cure, everyone either works or dies. There is no third option. Assure claims this is temporary, because once his wife develops a cure, slavery ends. But until then, it's unfortunate, but necessary. He even tries to be a benevolent slaver. He executes guards who are particularly sadistic and hangs their bodies publicly as examples. Slaves can theoretically earn freedom by surviving 3 rounds in the hole, a gladiatorial arena, but it's still slavery. But he's also convinced he's managing it responsibly. The reality for the slaves is nightmare fuel. They're sent on scrap runs to trog-infested steelworks to collect metal. Missions everyone calls suicide runs because most people don't come back. The food is called slop, and it's made from trogs. They're eating mutated former humans. The steel mill is toxic, the work is dangerous, and the life expectancy is measured in months. Then you meet Werner, who's organizing a slave rebellion, and his plan is simple: kidnap Assure's baby daughter Marie and use her for experimentation. Because, well, Marie was born with natural immunity to TDC. Assure's wife Sandra is working on synthesizing that immunity into a mass-producible cure, but it's taking time. Werner wants to skip that research phase and experiment on the infant directly, which might kill her, but fast-track a cure. If you help the rebellion succeed and kidnap Marie, Sandra, the scientist, tells you something. She doesn't know how Assure was even able to maintain order. The slaves who fought for freedom don't know how to run a steel mill. The whole operation might collapse into chaos, and then nobody gets cured. Oh, and Werner? He's revealed to be a former raider who just wants power. His concern for the slaves is debatable at best. So those choices matter, right? Do you choose Assure or Werner? Well, not really. The game assigns no karma for either choice. Bethesda deliberately refused to tell you which decision is right. Side with Assure, and you're perpetuating slavery, but the cure might actually happen and eventually free everyone. But side with Werner, and you're kidnapping a baby for potentially lethal experimentation, and the whole society might collapse anyway. Fake game choices have no real-life mirrors, right? Well, no. Roman mining operations, Damnation ad medulla, worked exactly like this. Slaves were sent into Spanish silver mines where 40,000 people labored day and night, shackled and beat, expected to die within months. The Romans needed the silver for their currency system. Without it, the economy collapses. With it, tens of thousands die in the dark. Nazi Germany called it extermination through labor. Concentration camp prisoners built V2 rockets in underground facilities without light or fresh air, given minimal tools and food, and then worked until death. The regime needed the weapons. The prisoners needed to not be slaves. There was no version where everyone wins. The Pitt forces you into the same impossible arithmetic. How many people can suffer today for how many people to potentially be saved tomorrow? Who gets to make that calculation? What if the person making it is lying to themselves about the real motivations? The game doesn't answer these questions. It just makes you pick and then live with it. And still, that is nothing compared to Fallout 4, which we'll get to shortly. But first, we have to talk about New Vegas's completely different approach to slavery. Instead of giving you moral ambiguity or individual choice, it shows you systematic slavery at civilizational scale. Edward Sala was a follower of the apocalypse, basically wasteland teachers and doctors who travel around helping people. He was trained in anthropology and linguistics. Smart guy, good intentions, genuinely wanted to help rebuild civilization. Then he discovered historical text about Rome and a Mormon fort and decided, you know what the post-apocalypse needs? The Roman Empire. He renamed himself Caesar, started conquering tribes across Arizona, and built what the game explicitly describes as an enormous conscripted slave army. By New Vegas's timeline, the Legion controls Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. That's 4 states worth of territory, and almost all of it runs on slave labor. The acquisition method is brutally simple. Conquer a tribe, erase their culture, enslave survivors. The Legion Slave Ledger, an actual in-game document you can find in Caesar's tent, tracks this like a business. Take the Twisted Hair tribe from Arizona. They were the Legion's allies, served as scouts during the Arizona campaign. Once Arizona was pacified and the Legion didn't need them anymore, they were enslaved anyway. Resistors were crucified along Interstate 40 as warnings to other tribes. This is structural slavery. Conquest exists to produce slaves. The Legion needs constant labor for infrastructure, supply lines, lines, food production, and camp maintenance. Slaves get sorted into categories based on utility. Labor slaves do the grunt work, which is carrying supplies, preparing food, and setting up camps. Skilled slaves, like Siri, a woman from New Mexico who is training to be a doctor before capture, provide specialized services. Then there's the women. Game designer Joshua Sawyer confirmed women in Legion territory exist to breed more soldiers. That's their function. If you play as a female courier and talk to Siri, she warns you that legionaries have been whispering about trying you out. The game doesn't elaborate because it doesn't need to. You understand exactly what that means. The historical accuracy here is deliberate and detailed. The Legion mint coins, gold arii, and silver denarii with Caesar's face stamped on them, exactly like the Roman emperors did. They use precise classical Latin pronunciation, they practice decimation, which is killing 1 in 10 soldiers for mutiny or cowardice. Every detail is researched. And still, that does not even come close to the slavery horrors of Fallout 4. Fallout 4 does something different. Instead of asking, is slavery evil, which, yes, obviously, it asks a much more uncomfortable question. Explore with me by looking at the Institute. Gen 3 synths are built in laboratories from scratch. Lab-grown bones, muscles, organs, skin, everything is biological, grown from DNA samples taken from Sean, your kidnapped son, but they all look human, they bleed human, and at a cellular level, they're indistinguishable from natural-born humans. The only non-biological component is a neurological implant in their brain that allows the Institute to program them, wipe their memories, and shut them down with recall codes. The Institute's position is straightforward. Synths are property. They're extremely sophisticated machines that approximate human behavior, but they're tools. Director Father, who, again, is her son Sean, now an old man running the Institute, insists this. They maintain the underground facility, they work as spies by replacing surface dwellers, they provide unlimited controllable labor. They're the perfect workforce because they don't complain, don't age, and can be memory wiped if they malfunction. Opposing them is the Railroad, and the name is not subtle. They're explicitly modeled on the Underground Railroad that helped enslaved Americans escape to the free states before the Civil War. They use identical operational methods. Secret routes marked with chalk symbols, safe houses, password phrases, fake identities for escapees. They even use the same terminologies, sympathizers as tourist and escaped synths as packages. The organization formed after something called the Broken Mask Incident in 2229, when a synth malfunctioned in Diamond City and revealed that the Institute had been replacing citizens with identical copies. Once people knew synths could pass as human, some started helping them escape. The evidence goes both ways, and the game doesn't deliberately resolve it. On one hand, Nick Valentine is a Gen 2 synth, an older model with visible mechanical parts, and he has a distinct personality, makes moral judgments, feels emotions, questions his existence. Curie is a research robot who transfers into a synth body and then experiences falling in love for the first time and doesn't know what to do with it. Glory is a synth who refused memory wipe and chose to fight for the Railroad. She demonstrates autonomous moral agency, but on the other hand, recall codes instantly shut down any synth. Just say a specific phrase, and they collapse like a puppet with cut strings. The Institute claims emotional responses are just very sophisticated programming, like ChatGPT going very lewd or something. Maybe everything that looks like consciousness is just really good code. This recreates every single philosophical argument used to justify real slavery throughout history. They're not really people, they're property we created. They need us to give them purpose. They don't have souls, consciousness, or real feelings. Meanwhile, other people risk their lives running an underground railroad to free them, convinced these are people being held in bondage. Fallout 4 makes this uncomfortable by denying you clear answers. Are synths people? The game shows you evidence both ways, it makes you decide, and then it forces that decision to matter. The Railroad ending frees all synths and destroys the Institute. The Brotherhood of Steel ending commits genocide against all synths because they view them as abominations. The Institute ending perpetuates synth slavery forever, but also represent your son's life work, and potentially the best hope for rebranding advanced civilization. There's no karma system anymore. The game won't tell you which choice is right, it just asks, if it looks human, acts human, bleeds human, and begs for freedom, does it matter if it was built in a lab? And then it makes you answer that question by picking which faction to support, all of which destroy others. So we've looked at 3 completely different slavery systems. Paradise Falls is pure economics, the Pitt is moral philosophy disguised as industrial necessity, the Legion is systematic cultural genocide, and Fallout 4 is an ontological question about personhood and like the survival of humanity, I guess. But they all have one thing in common, or well, 6 actually. See if you can see the pattern. First, there's instrumentality, treating people as tools for a purpose. Slaves in Paradise Falls exist to generate caps, Legion slaves exist to build infrastructure, synths exist to maintain the Institute. Secondly, there is denial of autonomy, removing someone's ability to make choices. The Callers enforce this literally. Synth recall codes enforce this technologically. The Pitt enforces it through disease. Work or die, no third option. Thirdly, fungibility, treating people as interchangeable. Generic slaves are worth exactly 250 caps regardless of who they are. Legion slave ledgers track people as inventory units. Synths can be produced infinitely to replace losses. Fourthly, violability, treating bodies as lacking boundaries. The collar that cuts into your neck whenever you swallow, the systematic SA implied in Legion territory, the Institute wiping synth memories and reprogramming their personalities. Fifthly, the ownership, the explicit claim that one human can possess another. You literally buy Clover. The Legion brand slaves, the Institute has serial numbers on synths. And finally, denial of such activity, refusing to acknowledge someone has inner experiences. They're just property. They're machines. They're not really people. So what am I talking about? Fallout uses the exact same psychological mechanisms that real slaveholders have used throughout history. And all those horrors still exist today. Modern slavery generates $236 billion in illegal profits annually. That's not a typo. That's more than the GDP of most countries. The International Labor Organization estimates 49.6 million people are currently enslaved worldwide. That number has increased 20% in the last 5 years. We're not solving this problem. It's getting worse. And maybe that's exactly what Fallout is already telling us. If we don't stop it, it's going to get worse, just like the medicine economy. Want to find out what's going on there? Click here to watch my video on it.